Hello, everyone. Welcome to the call on NLP and hypnosis research. I'm William Horton, psychology doctorate, licensed clinical psychologist, alcohol and drug counselor, considered by many to be the world's leading NLP and hypnosis trainer. So anyway, I'm going to have some fun today, and we're going to do something a little bit different. First, I'm going to talk about the research, and is there scientific evidence of what we do works? Is there? And if so, how does this affect us? Good, bad, indifferent. And then how can we use it? That's the important stuff, is how does this affect us? How can we use it? Because I'm always telling people in our field, because it's been accused of being a pseudoscience, not real, not anything validated, which I think is interesting, especially coming from, psychology, which is kind of a soft art in and of itself. But still, there is research out there. So how does it affect us? Right? And then one thing we have to do is look at some of the research that's coming out, and it may not say hypnosis NLP, but if you can extrapolate out what we do and how this can impact us. This is the cool stuff. So first thing I'll talk about is there's some recent research just last year, 2014, that shows thoughts help build muscle. Brian Clark at Ohio University did a study, and it was kind of cool. And he really built upon what the Cleveland Clinic did a few years before, where they found that thoughts can make fingers stronger, especially if the fingers were incapacitated, right? That there were thought exercises kept the fingers 35% stronger than not, right? And so what they did, now that we have the technology, they measure magnetic fields for brain pathways, neural pathways. So how is this useful to us? It is in fitness and in health, the mind and the body both matter. They're connected. I'm always fascinated, and you hear me say a lot that, it's kind of fun that in our field we talk about mind, body, spirit, and yet nobody talks about the body too much, right? So, and also in sports, sometimes people get the two, they begin to separate the two, right? They're only worried, physical trainers, a lot of them don't really get into the mental side of it, right? And now we're mental trainers, we don't get into the physical side of it. Still trying to find, I remember reading some research, but it said that exercise that you have to physically think about, because it's not strained, but it made you had to think about it, like what movements you were doing, things like that, were 2 to 3 times more effective than mindless exercise. Just getting on a treadmill or an elliptical, just like reading a book, watching TV. That's a little bit, might get your cardio, but it's more effective if you're actually thinking about what you're doing and why you're trying to do it, right? So it kind of makes sense, right? And it also really strengthens the mind-body connection. It's why athletes that do things like that, I seem to be more in touch with their bodies overall, right? So how can we use this? Well, with athletes to increase strength and flexibility, right? The good athletes do it anyway, but what if we take them, especially young athletes, things like that, and help them with hypnosis and NLP to visualize, like, after their weights, that the next time they lift weights, instead of benching 225, they're benching 230. So it goes up a little bit, and they picture it, and then your muscles actually get stronger. But I think it's most effective when someone's laid up, sick, or injured, so they can't exercise, especially if they're used to exercising. Some of this research pointed out that, yes, if you were an exerciser and you did this, of course, it was much more effective, which kind of makes sense. So what we want to do then is, what if we combine the two? And then it would make it even more effective. Now, I know I've used this like on my long plane trips when I'm overseas, and, and then it's hard to get back in the routine of working out, lay in bed and visualize a really good workout. Especially since I am a guy that works out a lot, my body's knows what it's like to work out. It's not a strange feeling, and they do know now they can track blood flow going to the muscles as you're doing it. As Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say when he was training, that he put his mind into the muscle, like his biceps and his whatever exercise he was doing, he physically focused on it, not just did the exercise. And I see guys at the health club, they're carrying on conversation, not thinking about what they're doing. And then seems like the bodybuilders are focused on it, and then some people would confuse as, oh, they must be conceited. They're really focusing on what they're doing in the mirror. But if they're smart, they're actually focusing on like their mind into the muscle of what they're working on, right? So but what if you're injured and like you got a broken ankle, so you can't do that leg, but you can work out other things. What if you visualize working out, right? Things like that should work. So why not do that? Why not practice it? Why not, do it yourself and then do other people? The next is the neuroscience of nostalgia, right? Because researchers have found that, and we've all known that olfactory sense of smell takes a different path through the brain than input from the other senses. It bypasses it, goes directly to the deepest parts of your brain. A lot of this has to do with survival. You need to be able to smell food, prey, predators, things like that, pheromones and mating. I mean, it's very important. We've deadened our sense of smell, dogs have supposedly 500 times stronger sense of smell. But I know that I've read, again, if someone comes up with the research, please let me know, I'll put it up, that there's no reason our sense of smell can't be a lot better than what it is, 5 to 10 times easy. Because we're not, in evolutionary terms, as Billy would say, we're nanoseconds away in evolutionary terms from basically hunter-gatherers, if not even before that. The few thousand years we've been doing what we're doing, but we've really deadened our senses. Partially, they're overwhelmed, and secondly, we just don't pay them any attention, But anyway, a group of researchers in Sweden asked 72 people between 65 and 80 to describe memories that came to mind after being exposed to a certain trigger, right? These triggers were 20 smells with names, or just the names of those 20 smells. But what they found were the triggers with the names of smells led to recall of more memories. The people who had been exposed to just smells not only felt more pleasant, but they felt more like they had been transported back in time. If you ever walked in, and I say that because holidays have strong, unique smells that might bring up memories. How often do you smell turkey? And it really starts for us in America, especially, with Thanksgiving, with, turkey or ham, right? You smell it and it brings back memories, or like pumpkin pie. We don't eat that the rest of the year, so it brings up certain things. And, you'll think back to, and there's certain, pine needles from Christmas trees, things like that, right? So it brings these things up, right? It also brings back memories from younger childhood, right? Because, more than twice as many of the memories were from under the age of 10, when you're still developing a lot of the conscious stuff going on. So these are like right to that part of your brain. It's why, to this day, if I smell Old Spice aftershave, it makes me think of my dad, my uncles, things like that when they were wearing that. That was from when I was a little kid, right? I remember one place I saw somewhere there was an aftershave. Don't laugh. It's called High Karate. And so I smelled it, right? Maybe it was on a shelf and somebody had from old. And it's like, my God, I started thinking back to high school, right? When I was in high school, that was coming out. Guys were wearing it, right? So, it's so powerful, right? So how can we use this? Is this useful? Yes. What if you use smell as a trigger for your NLP or your hypnotic commands, right? So it builds in real self anchors, right? I did this with an athlete he was a wrestler, and it was the smell of sweat. It actually gave him more power the more he smelled it. So when he was training, if anybody ever wrestled, they cranked the room up to 90, and then, you're working out, you're drenched in sweat, plus it's young testosterone-driven males, so let's just say it's a little strong, but it became a very strong, powerful, positive memory for him, right? And then when he went into competition, of course, you're sweating, you're nervous, you're scared, and you're physically exerting. It made him more powerful, not less. I'm going to make sure to get this to Jeff Neal, one of our NLP and hypnosis trainers up in Chicago. He's an MMA trainer. And I'm going to ask him if he could think about doing that with his group. Because I remember one time in passing, he talked about, when he was competing, and he would walk out into the arena and he'd smell some of the smells in the arena, not just his own sweat, but, the popcorn, the beer, the stuff like that. That was might have been a subconscious trigger for him, right? And then I asked him, and I'm going to ask him to think about this. It's why maybe when, American fighters go to a different market and they're competing where the crowd doesn't do what we do, does it change some of those triggers, or when they come here, right? So just think about the power of that. The next research is controlling our DNA through mind control. It's basically mind-body connection revisited. There's a study published in Cancer by a group that measured the physical influences on us, on our mental state, more specifically on our DNA. That was Dr. Linda Carlson. She found that in breast cancer patients, support group involvement in mindfulness meditation produced better results. But what happened was it preserved telomere length, right? These are the things at the end of your DNA that cap your chromosomes and helps prevent chromosome deterioration. As we age and as things break down, your cells have to duplicate. Each time they duplicate, they might they shorten these telomeres, and there's no known cause per se of a specific disease, but we do know that they wither with age. Maybe things like age-related issues, dementia, Alzheimer's, or osteoarthritis, or osteoporosis also, all these things, heart disease, right, can be affected by this. So we want these intact. So what if we use our brains to actually imagine lengthening these things so it makes you more youthful, more vigorous, more healthy? Because she wondered if these mentally rooted changes are long-lasting. The study was recently done, so they don't know. But if these same patterns hold true for other cancers and other conditions, it would be wild in diagnosis and treatment, right? And we all know that the therapeutic potential of mind-body stuff, biofeedback especially, in cancer patients and other things, heart, blood pressure, headaches, pain control, sleep, they're great. And whenever I get those research, it is not a stretch to say biofeedback. We can use that research for what we do, right? Because in a hypnosis thing is as you relax, get in, notice your toes, if you're doing a progressive, right? You can actually add it into what we're doing, right? It's fascinating stuff that we can use right now. And it ties into the next one, which emotions are mapped in the body. Because now research has found that the most common emotions trigger strong bodily sensations. We've known that forever. Now there's scientific evidence for it, right? And that the bodily maps of these sensations were different for different emotions. You feel anger, pain, lust. I know a big one I was just talking about. I actually found this when I was looking at, erotic hypnosis and why when you feel comfortable with someone and in love at one level with someone, it feels much different in your body than when you're passionate about someone, when you have lust. Well, they're two different parts of the body. It's two different sensations, right? And these are consistent across European and Asian cultures. So that means it must have a biological basis, right? So it's why that sometimes, going back to the other thing I was talking about, that when you're in a long-term relationship and you get more comfortable, passion subsides, right? You're feeling, but does that mean if you change where you feel that emotion about your partner in your body, it would bring back that, oh my God, I want you now. I want you in the worst way, standing up in a canoe, or whatever it is. Boom. What if we just remap these things? It's fascinating stuff, right? Because emotions adjust as we know, not our mental, but also our physical state. Throw your shoulders back and your head up pulls you out of depression, right? But also maybe just thinking about it. It's why, I've taught for years that one of the anger things is where do you feel anger in your body? Somebody's pissed off, right? Where do you feel that anger in your body? Oh, it's in my gut. It's red. It's throbbing. What if you imagine it going out of your body and you picture it turning to blue, like a blue calmness, right? Well, then you see people physiologically change, right? Because, these corresponding bodily changes trigger emotional changes and vice versa. It's why sometimes you have a vague feeling of I call it being discombobulated. Maybe there's something going on in your body that your brain doesn't know how to process. So it might interpret it as one thing when it's something else, right? So it's just kind of interesting. So this has great implications for what we're going to do in the future, right? That these emotional disorders and things that we're working with can be much, much different, right? it's some cool stuff. Some cool stuff, right? So what I want you to do is think about how you can use that, with your clients. I've also started to use it with my weight loss, oh, your hunger, where do you feel it? Well, a lot of emotional eaters don't feel hunger in their stomach. They feel an emptiness maybe in their heart, maybe in their mind, maybe in their soul. Who cares? But what if they imagine nurturing and feeding that rather than food, because they're not physically hungry, right? So there's some interesting stuff that we can do with this, right? So if you like this, there's more to come, but this is my pitch midway. Sign up for the newsletter if you're not already on it. And you can sign up at www.nfnlp.com or www.drwillhorton.com. And I'll make sure you get on the newsletter. Please tell your friends, people in the field, if you got a mailing list, send it out. Please get them to sign up, because the more people we get doing this kind of stuff, it adds validation to what we do. Here's another cool study, controlling genes with mental states to release drugs. There was some research done in Europe that there's a novel gene regulation method that allows specific brain waves to control gene expression, which means turning a conversion and turning a gene into a protein for therapeutic purposes, right? Now they're talking about the concept of thought-controlled implant that could help combat neurological diseases like chronic headache, back pain, epilepsy. Great. Now, this is where we're actually ahead of the curve. Rather than, put in a little mental chip or, a foreign device, we've been doing this for decades. Any stage hypnotist that has done drunk on water or pass around a fake joint and then people get high, right? You ever notice that when you do that, people that have been drunk act drunk better than people that have never been drunk? People who have never been high, they're more, it's different, right? They don't have a memory. And Richard Bandler always talks about drug states, about how you can access drug states and then access that state without the drug, so you can get high without being high. You can do this without doing that, right? So this has great implications for us, because what if we use this kind of thing to talk about increasing the effectiveness of drugs or, pharmacology, right? Or vitamins, right? I'm working with someone after the first of the year, which is today. We're going to meet and talk about, they do like vitamin infusion therapy, and there's some wonderful research that high dose of vitamin C infused has better efficacy on cancer treatment than most chemotherapy with none of the side effects. But try to find that research, and they yell at you because, anyway, let's not go down that path, right? But what if we have the person imagine, even if they're taking traditional pharmacy drugs for, you got an infection and you need antibiotics. What if you, like for bronchitis, what if you do a hypnotic treatment with someone, and I've done this when I'm taking something, that it's going directly to that part of the body that needs it, right? I know I did a session on someone, they'd get cold sore outbreaks. They were getting a cold sore outbreak. They happened to be in the office. So I said, and they were taking their, lysine, which is a natural thing that helps. CoQ10 helps. And they actually had there's a antiviral. They had that. They just started taking it. So I showed them a mental technique of relaxing and imagine the lysine and the antiviral going right to where that cold sore were and just knocking that, because what happens is it stops the DNA replication. We just had research talks about our brains can affect our DNA, right? It's why when you're under stress, you will get a cold sore or herpes outbreak. Herpes zoster, one of the types, right? It's why when I had a shingles outbreak, right? Which is like, wow, what happened? Well, I was under a lot of stress. That affected my body. It brought it out. Boom, it was there, right? It went away quicker. Even the docs were, he gave me the antivirals. I was imagining, okay, calming my stress down, picture going right there to where I was having the outbreak, and it went away, right? So what if we do that, right? Combine it with that, what I talked about there, right? Same with vitamins, right? When you take your vitamins, right? As Captain Billy would talk about, this could be the underlying thing of the placebo effect, right? So it's fascinating stuff that we can do, Then there's some cool research about calorie burning, fat burning in your brain, because there's new research is saying that white fat can be transformed into brown fat, meaning that people might be able to regain some of this good fat. because brown fat burns quickly, helps you lose weight, as opposed to like white fat, which is cellulite. Once you get it, it's hard to get rid of because there's a molecular process in the brain, and again, the brain of mice, but the brains of mice are very similar to ours at the base level, right? So this was in the journal Cell, right? So they're looking for a way to develop some way to interfere with the signal. But what if we use this to help turn brown fat and so it gets burned rather than stored as white fat, right? So can we use NLP and hypnosis to train the brain to correct and turning fat into good fat? So if you're like next holiday season, when you're getting ready to eat, that you're going to eat a little extra, which might be normal, it goes to brown fat, which is the healthy fat inside your muscles that burn very quickly, right? So you don't pack on cellulite. Maybe this is what happened with people that naturally think thin, right? That they go, I might put on a couple pounds, it'll go away real quick because it doesn't go to my belly or my hips or my thighs. As those people will go, it goes right to my butt or right to my other thing, right? Fascinating. My love handles, my gut, whatever, right? So this is what we can do and add it to your weight loss program. Here's one of my favorites, gaining status with red sneakers. Gaining status with red sneakers. In other words, how to stand out in a crowd. This is research back now. This is why I wear white gym shoes with designer suits when I teach. I've done it for years, and I knew that years later, people remembered me as the trainer with the white gym shoes, even when I quit wearing white gym shoes for a while with my suits, right? Well, actually, it started because I just had knee surgery again, and it hurt, right? If I didn't wear gym shoes with a lot of cushion, at the end of a long training day or at a conference, especially where I'm on my feet, I'm moving around, I'd have to ice my legs. I thought if I wear gym shoes, it didn't work. I was giving up the dress shoes for comfort, drove certain people crazy. Kevin Hogan, Scott McFall. And it's like, but dude, I just got to do this. But then I found later that, like I said, people were, you're the guy that wears. So I went back to wearing the gym shoes, even though now I got shoes that are quite comfortable, right? My knees are much better. Because now the research says what happens if you deviate from the accepted dress code or social norms, it has surprising status benefits, right? Because non-conformity has a social cost. You might be an outcast, you don't go to a biker meeting dressed in a three-piece suit. You got to have your biker gear on. So, but if you do show up different, people assume people breaking the rules enjoy a powerful enough position that they're not concerned about the cost. It's like when Dali walked down the streets of Paris, walking in aardvark, right? It was enough different that it gained status in the eyes of others. And then there's the MIT example where a guy was doing an MIT project to get funding for something. And most of the people, when they present the proposal after they make the first cut, they have to present their proposal, PowerPoint slides, things like that to a group. Most people were using the standard MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, background because the status. Well, he went with his own design. Well, he got higher ratings because people assumed he must be farther along and in higher status because he was disregarding the MIT stuff, right? So it got him to the next level, which is kind of interesting, right? So it heightens our status in the eyes of others, because that's a goal. We want to up here higher up, right? And it can lead us to be more influential with members of groups or organizations. Or if you're single, even getting more desirable dates. That's why they call it the peacock effect. These guys, there's one guy who walks around like, I think he just looks like an idiot, but but I'm not dating him. So, but it's, it makes, he must be confident. He must be this, right? So, if you're aware of this, if you want to devote some effort into enhancing your status, if you deviate from the dress code or you deviate a little bit, it might just do enough to flip you into a different place in people's brains, right? Oh, you're not like everybody. I remember, and part of that was when I was first starting this with NLP, right? especially as a trainer and speaker. Everybody was a mini Tony Robbins. This is back in the day. Tony Robbins always wore, dark blue suit, usually pinstripe, light blue shirt or white shirt, red tie, suspenders, right? Very dressed up, right? And here I'm showing up, nice suit, but I always wore funny looking ties and gym shoes, right? So I went back to, it's kind of like Dr. Seuss. Why fit in when you were born to stand out, right? And there's a Harvard Business Review, that you can read. And it's kind of cool, right? So especially if you've got some credentials in whatever you're doing, I think, and I'd like to see more research on this, but if you don't have credentials, you're breaking into the field, and that you might just be considered a nut job. But if you got some credentials, like you're a speaker at a conference, like you're doing something different, and you have the guts to be a little bit different, right? Then it might do that. People go, whoa, And again, there was a guy who was taught at Harvard Business School that wore red gym shoes, Converse sneakers. And years later, people could remember him by the red shoe, and he was better remembered. And he was rated as must having a higher status with the university than the other guys, because he had the guts to be different, right? And remember when Bill Belichick in football, National Football League in America, all the coaches were wearing suits. Then they went to like polo shirts. He always comes out with a ripped up, like a hoodie sweatshirt, right? Why? Well, he's good at what he does. He doesn't care. And guess what? It got him remembered, right? So it's kind of interesting. Here's another study, dementia caused by anesthesia. And I work around, one of my clinical jobs currently is to hear that people, they just aren't the same after surgery, right? Because there's evidence that molecules that bind to the sites that affect neurons deactivate the proteins for a wide range of cognitive functioning, including sleep, attention, learning, and memory. It puts you to sleep that's what anesthetic does, but it might affect learning and memory, right? But really what they're finding out, it may amplify this in patients or people that are already genetically predisposed to dementia or Alzheimer's or have other risk factors, right? But it's something to think about, right? And I put this in there. Why? Well, could we use hypnosis and NLP to implant positive suggestions about drugs pre-op? See, you go back, I talked earlier, a lot of this research ties together, about drug states. So, okay, you got to have surgery, right? Oh, there's my thing going in the background. So if you had to have surgery, what if you did a hypnotic session that when you go under anesthetic, it's only going to do what it's supposed to do. It's going to do this. It's not going to do that and this, right? And also use more hypnosis for pain control during minor procedures, right? Don't always opt for the most, chemically invasive one. And as more research comes out, they may be some more evidence to what we do for that. Kind of cool, right? And here's one, and it's the last couple going to tie together with the other stuff, but in a different way. Is depression and all mental stuff overlooked, right? Because we're always looking at where we're going to put our money, our effort, and our research, right? And, more than 350 million people in the world are affected by depression. It's one of the most common in the world. It's a cause of disability. You get so depressed you can't move. And 2/3 of the people that commit suicide have this condition. I was just reading about a teenager, a transgender teen. Well, he was so depressed, he killed himself, right? And most people go untreated. This kid did, right? And other people, Robin Williams, right? He was depressed. Goes on and on, right? So one way to look at it is, cancer research thriving. There's vast amounts of research on this. They're cranking out genetically targeted therapies, sophisticated models. They're doing this, that. But research into depression and all mental stuff seems it's floundering, right? The clinical trials they tried seem to fail. Genetic studies come up empty-handed. A lot of reason it's hard to define these. What is depression? It's not like a cancer. We can see it. We can look at it. We can touch it. Heart disease, or diabetes. There's certain physical things, right? It's harder to define. Also, there's still the stigma. Physical disease is okay, but mental, no. We always talk about in the addiction world, diabetes is fine, but alcoholism is not. Just control it. But people don't tell diabetics, just control it with your thought, right? But anyway, so there's that, right? And then what's also, they're finding out, most of the chemical interventions, we all know this in our field, the holistic side, have side effects as bad or worse than the issue they're treating. You take an antidepressant for depression, but it has other, it makes you fat, makes you lethargic, you have no sex drive. Well, if you're fat, lethargic, and no sex drive, how do you know if you're depressed or not, right? Then, of course, there's the stigma of getting help. And we can't disregard this. There's the insurance companies and government labeling it. Once you get treatment, now you're always treated. It's in your record. I don't care what they say, it can come back, right? So big, I know that's big in the addiction field. That like people get help, but then once they get help, now they've been labeled an alcoholic. I know people that 20 years later, if it was with a certain company, and then they go to get, and this happened, they go to get life insurance, it was from the same company that happened to underwrite their health policy from 20 years ago. They still had a record of it. They wouldn't give them the life insurance without a big rider because they were a substance abuser, even though they've been clean for 20 years. Fascinating, right? And of course, you work for the government, you go get help for substance abuse or mental issues, you may lose your security clearance. Fascinating, right? So what can we do? Well, we can help people control mental states and their outlook. And this is one where being outside the norm, not getting insurance, not being tied into the government can be a good thing because we can sell it as that. Only person going to know is you. You're not your insurance company, not Medicare, not this, right? And of course, the research does point out that people that pay for any kind of intervention are much more likely to have positive effect than people that don't pay anything if they have insurance. And the insurance pays for everything. And there's one from an op-ed piece, and a lot of it's taken verbatim. I'll give his guy's name at the end. But the disease model of mental health care should be disregarded because it supposedly gives clarity without diagnosis, right? And Mr. Insel, Thomas Insel, who's director of the National Institute of Mental Health, recently said that traditional psychiatric diagnoses has outlived their usefulness. Because what happens, it's too easy to assume that these mental health problems, especially ones that attract diagnoses as, schizophrenia, bipolar, severe depression, they must be a biological illness, right? Random and unconnected to a person's life. If it's physical and we fix the physical, that's fine, right? But we all know that's not true because when you start asking questions about this traditional disease-based model way of thinking, it just falls apart. Is your depression tied to your life? Well, damn it, yes. How can it not be? Your parent just died. There's financial difficulties. That's tied to your life, right? And if you have some kind of mental schism where you might slip into like a little bit of whatever's going on, a little bit of bipolar, a little bit of depression, a little bit of whatever it happens to be, a little bit of a break, is it all physical or is it psychosocial? Once those things get fixed, maybe the other stuff gets fixed, right? Rather than just drop in and again, like we said before, if they try to give psychotropics, well, damn side effects are worse than the thing that they're treating sometimes, right? And, this is where clinicians for a long time, they have concerns about the benefits of this medication, because there's more and more evidence that psychological therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy, which hypnosis can be kind of labeled under if you give them behavioral aspects with the mental aspects, right? And this can be for severe problems, right? And so, but again, this research isn't being followed up enough because there's nobody backing it, because there's no pharmaceutical company that will push it, right? They're the ones that underwrite a lot of the research, right? So, as this gentleman says, we have to move away from the disease model, you know, and that basically says that emotional distress, some kind of mental dysfunction at the time, is symptomatic of a biological thing. And instead, we have to embrace a mental health of well-being that, you know, we're mind, body, spirit. And the way we're living our life, things, biological factors, social factors, circumstantial factors are a part of our human experience that drastically affect our physiological processes that help us build up our sense of who we are and how the world works. Therefore, when that's falling apart, your world falls apart. And maybe there's no psychopharmacological intervention that can fix that, right? It's why they, you know, treatment, you know, depression that's resistant to treatment, you know, traditional treatment of pharmacology. It's not fixing the underlying things. You know, I see it in people in nursing homes and other things, you know, nursing homes, TBI places and stuff. Why? You know, you give them a drug, they're still in the nursing home. They're still in a TBI. That's not going to change, right? So we got to quit, you know, it's Peter Kinderman from Liverpool that talks about, and is brilliant with, when people have emotional distress, right? It's not a symptom of an illness. It's the emotional distress. If you fix that, as we all know in hypnosis and NLP, we can have much more effect in things. And it would have greater scientific validity and would be more effective than, you know, designing and treating people. You know, we must help people help themselves and each other rather than disempowering them saying, here, take this, right? So that's to wrap all this up. So to wrap it up, we use research to help explain the world, why we do what we do, right? And to do this, you have to stay current. So again, join our newsletter and keep in touch. When you come across research, let me know. You know, I read Scientific American Mind, some of the journals of this and that, and people send me things, Captain Billy, some of the others. But you may come across it. Let me know. We can get it out to the wider population because it adds validation to our field, hypnosis, NLP, EFT, all the things that we do. And please refer others to our information. You know, people, if you're in a hypnosis group, an NLP group, EFT group, you know, a counseling group, therapy, you know, let the others, especially the practitioners, know about this because it adds validity to what we do. So if you don't already, please sign up now at Dr. Will Horton or nfnlp.com. So I'd like to thank you for being a part of this call, and I look forward to as we trudge the road to happiness.